One of my most favorite friends in the whole world is just a few years older than me, although she doesn't like to hear me remind her of that. But she's never afraid to ask me questions about what I am doing. Most often, her questions will seem extremely simple, but they tend to send my mind wandering and pondering, which then leads me into prayer. What do you want to do, she will ask. What kind of steps will you need to take? Who can be most helpful during this time? And so on and so forth. Her questions often remind me that the root of the word question is quest. Quest means to seek, to search, to journey, with an eye towards finding a possible hidden treasure. Mindful that the adventures along the way may prove more valuable than what lies ahead at the journey's end. Kind of why I sometimes prefer the journey over the treasure at the end. When I think of questions, I think Jesus kind of I think Jesus loved questions. He seemed to come by them honestly. Being a child of a woman who dared to question an angel sent to invite her to become the mother of God. And throughout Jesus' journey, Jesus fearlessly asked questions of his own. And with his own words and his own actions, he seemed to stir up questions in a lot of other people. Just as did today's actions in our gospel reading. The questions posed to the once blind man may seem somewhat simple, but such questions can evoke both great struggle as well as great wisdom. The question posed to this healed man, after all, are the same questions I want to be able to answer about my own encounter with the Christ. What happened to you? Where is he now? Now, as I work towards some discernment that these and other questions in my life seem to foster, it helps me to remember a quote that I read that was written by a Trappist monk. Wendy Wright shared in her book, The Vigil, about this Trappist monk. And it says, to be a Christian does not mean knowing all the answers. To be a Christian means being willing to live the part of self where the question is born. Now, the neighbors of that formerly blind man might have been unsatisfied with his response to their questions. So that might be why they took him to the Pharisees, who seemed to have a few questions of their own. I am amazed, though, by just how loaded the Pharisees' questions can be. The Pharisees seem furious with the formerly blind man and his responses. And they really and truly can't take any more, so they insult him and throw him out of the synagogue. Upon rereading this gospel, I tend to remember a less dramatic, but still unsettling encounter I experienced a few years ago. I had sent a note to my dad stating my intentions of becoming a minister, a full-time minister. I had already been a certified lay minister in the Swanton Church, but I wanted him to know I was coming here. My sister was there, and her interpretation of my dad's response, as well as my little brother who was there, was not necessarily favorable. Her interpretation was, she's a woman. How can she be a minister? She has not had the best life. She has not always been leading a clean life. How can she consider being a minister? And they added, she's been divorced. How can she be a minister? How can a divorced person be a minister? How can I be even smart enough to even be a minister? It became clear to me that when my sister shared this response with me, that they were administering a type of test of their own to see how far they think I may have strayed. Now, as with the Pharisees, the questions came not from the desire for discernment, but from the biases of the culture that had been given to this blind man. Now, one of the risks of discernment is that when we come to moments of clarity, as did the man who received the gift of sight, others may not necessarily enjoy in the sharing of this vision. They may actually condemn us for wanting to share the miracle. They may even want to set up roadblocks so that our vision will be obstructed. When challenges and hurdles come, it is our sense of call, born of discernment, that can help us say, just as the once blind man said, "One thing I know is." So, what does discernment look like to you? I can recall the story about a Franciscan friar had once shared. Once St. Francis sought to know whether God wanted him to spend all of his time in prayer or spend part of his time preaching. So he told Brother Masio to go to Sister Clare and to ask her, along with at least one of her companions, to pray what he ought to do. He also sent the brother to go ask Brother Sylvester. Now, after spending time in prayer, each sent Brother Masio back to Francis with the same message: go, preach. Upon hearing this, Francis immediately stood, said to Brother Masio, "So let's go, in the name of the Lord." Now, I feel that Francis's story reminds us that discernment is never always just about ourselves alone, but is for the life of the community and often needs to be done in consultation with the members of the community. Francis knew it was crucial, however, to seek counsel of those steeped in a life of prayer, friends who knew him well and who sought God's longing, not merely their own desires. For Francis, listening to such people was like listening to Christ himself. Now, this story tends to echo a question that today's gospel message raises. To whom are we going to listen? To those with the loaded questions? To those whose vested interest would be threatened by our sense of call? Are we going to listen to institutions that proscribe how certain people may serve? Or will we listen to the living Christ who longs to heal each and every one of us, restore us, and set us free? This Lenten season, Where is your discernment leading you? Are you listening for the voice of God, or to those who are surrounding you and making suggestions? Do you have a friend filled with questions? And how helpful are those questions? Lent is a time for your discernment. Lent is a time for you to seek and find answers. Amen. And now, as a giving and forgiving people, let us share in our gifts, tithes, and offerings.